Zooey Mama, how's it going, everybody? I'm here today to talk about the newest card coming to Marvel Snap, Havok, and whether I think he is worth trying to get with tokens or through spotlight caches, or if he's worth passing and you could save your resources for a better card. Now, he's coming out December 19th, and he's going straight into Series 4, so Havok will only be 3,000 tokens on release, so that's great to see. He's also going to be featured in Spotlight caches alongside Nico Minoru and Legion. Both those cards are pretty good, so that's also great to see. That's a great Spotlight cache setup to have. And Havok is a 2-cost 0-powered card with the ability that after each turn you lose 1 max energy, but Havok himself will gain +4 power. And just to clarify the wording here, if you played Havok on turn 2, at the end of turn 2, Havok would gain 4 power. He'd be at 2-4, but coming around to turn 3, you'd only have 2 energy. At the start of turn 4, you would only have 2 energy. Start of turn 5, 2 energy. So whatever energy you're at, max energy, when you play Havok, that's where you're capped for the rest of the game. Okay, if you do give him to your opponent, let's say you Viper him over, your opponent is now capped at whatever energy they were at for the rest of the game. So that's kind of, one of the big strategies. But Havok will keep adding +4 power to himself as long as you have at least 1 max energy to lose. Okay, and that can happen on your side of the board or your opponent's. He will just get +4 at the end of each turn. So if you play him on turn 6, he's a 2-4 by the end of the game. Okay, he's basically never a 2-0. So you can look at him kind of a 2-4 as starting. And just to talk about him coming out and if he's worth it, before I get into his ability itself, this is a great Spotlight cache lineup. Like I mentioned, Nico and Legion are amazingly powerful cards. If you have neither of those cards, I highly recommend you trying to get Havok through Spotlight caches because you want to be getting Nico. She's one of, if not the best 1-cost card in the game at the moment, and Legion is still very strong. He doesn't see the same play rate as he used to, but he'll probably cycle back in at some point. So if you have neither Nico or Legion, definitely worth picking up through this week's Spotlight caches. And if you just have one of them, still might be worth it. I mean, these are good cards. Now, if you do have Nico and Legion, then Havok being Series 4, those are the best cards to buy with tokens, okay? Just speaking of Series 4 to 5, you can get both of them from Spotlight caches, but Series 4 are cheaper in the token shop. So if you do already have these cards, Legion and Nico, and you don't want to, get their variants from the Spotlight caches, Havok may just be a decent pickup from the token shop, regardless of how strong you think he is or is not, okay? So just putting that out there, it's a great position for Havok to be in. Cards that are questionable, that it's hard to know if they're going to be strong, or if you think they might be weak, it's best that they're coming in at Series 4 and with a good Spotlight cache lineup, okay? So I think Havok is in that position. I think it's possible Second Dinner did that lineup on purpose, knowing Havok might be the weakest card release of the month, which I kind of agree with. I think either Sebastian Shaw or Havok will be the weakest card release of December. Blob came in and he's taken over already, and I expect Celine to be very strong. She comes out at the end of the month. So to dive into Havok's ability, I did originally mention the synergy with Viper, that you can play Havok and then play Viper to send Havok to your opponent and limit them to, say, 3 energy for the rest of the game. And this is a combo that I think stands out and that people think of. And I originally put out a video on my initial thoughts for Havok when he was data mined. He was changed a bit since then. And, people were commenting that they thought I was really underestimating that combo. And Havok is now different. He's now a 2-0. Before he was a 2-1 that just got +3 at the end of each turn. Now he's a 2-0 that gets +4. So he's actually better at gaining power himself. So you can send him to your opponent, but then you basically need to hit that Havok that you gave them with Shang-Chi or Shadow King, which can be done, but they could block it with Cosmo or have Luke Cage or armor or something. There's just more steps to that. And even if you want to do Havok plus Viper, you will not get that most games, okay? I've played a decent amount of Mr. Negative. You do not get Mr. Negative out on turn 3 most games, and you usually have 2 triggers. Usually you play Zabu and Psylocke, or Zabu and Ravana Renslayer, to be able to get Mr. Negative out on turn 3, and you kind of rarely have that combo. It really doesn't happen that often to have 2 specific cards in the right order by turn 3 to make it work. Havok and Viper, you specifically need Havok on turn 2 into Viper on turn 3. You need to be able to play them in the same lane. I mean, locations alone are gonna be messing with you, okay? You cannot expect to get that every time. That cannot be the only way you play Havok. So I'm going to show you my deck here that I've put together that I'll be playing with Havok on day 1. And it does use Viper. Okay, we got Viper in here to potentially send Havok over, but it's not needed. And I think for Havok, that's important. We need to think of him as being good if you can Viper him over and really limit your opponent. He could hard counter some decks and you could just win based off that. But if that doesn't happen, because you often will not have that play available in hand, especially now that America Chavez has changed and your draws can't have better consistency through her, you got to be prepared to play Havok and keep him on your side of the board. Okay, that's just the reality of the situation. So this deck here does have the Havok Viper combo, and then you can hit Shadow King on your now opponent's Havok at the end of the game. But if you just keep Havok on your side and you play him maybe on turn 5, you can even play him on turn 4 with this deck. It's a very cheap deck. He's just going to power up. Okay, if you play Havok on turn 5, at the end of turn 6, he'll be a 2-8. If you got Havok on turn 4, at the end of turn 6, he's a 2-12, but you'd just be limited to 4 energy for the turns 5 and 6. So this deck is very cheap. It's got a lot of movement. These movement cards can make Miles Morales just cost 1. And we've got Werewolf by Night. He'll be bouncing around while our on reveals, keep him moving and keep him powering up. And then Leech is just in there to be really, really annoying. So turn 5, we can look to Leech, or we can look to play Havok with one of our other cards. Even Havok and Viper on turn 4 if you wanted. Basically, I think you want good tempo. I think if you are in the lead a bit too, that helps you with Vipering Havok over and not having it get blocked by your opponent, right, with Cosmo or something. I'm going to try this deck out on day 1. It does look a bit difficult to play. I think it's kind of more of a high skill deck, which a lot of Werewolf by Night decks are. But I think it's got potential, and it's just getting good stats on the board. Okay, using cheap cards that can generate good power. And again, for Havok, I think if you're playing Havok, you can not only have him in there as a Viper target. Okay, you have to be planning a plan B. You have to have a backup plan. And so in this deck, we can Havok and then Viper, or we can just use Viper on the hood. We can just save Havok on our side of the board and have him power up. Okay, I think that's the way we need to think about Havok. I think that's how he's going to see the most play. Not that the Viper synergy won't happen. And again, I'm trying it out here myself. I think it's got potential. I just know how inconsistent it is, and it won't often come together. So I'm going to try this deck out and see maybe this can work. Okay, Viper him sometimes, but often plan to keep him on your side of the board. Now you could also use Wave in a deck and actually have a 6-drop. Turn 5, do Havok plus Wave. And then turn 6, your 6-cost cards cost 4 because of Wave. Okay, so there's potential there. I went with a very cheap deck that doesn't really need too many specific cards on any given turn. That way it's just very consistent and reliable. But we will see how it performs. Now to get into my overall rating of Havok, it's questionable. I'm giving him 2.5 stars, 3 being kind of average, decent, 4 being pretty dang good, and 5 would be a card I just think is busted or broken. And so for Havok, I do have him a bit lower than Sebastian Shaw. My rating for Sebastian Shaw beforehand was 3.5, although after performance, maybe I'd even put him at 3. I was not really sold on him. I think Havok is interesting. He's got a really interesting ability. Even if he does not see much play right now, I think it's possible at some point in the future there's some new card comes out, some new combo, and he just goes absolutely nuts. Okay, I don't think that time is now, unless you get another card that can Viper him over, so he's just got more cards to synergize with. I don't think he's doing anything game breaking. I don't think he's much of a win condition outside of that inconsistent combo. And stats on your side of the board is decent, but a 2-4, isn't amazing. If you get him out in turn 5 and he's a 2/8 and you can consistently do that and not have your turn 6 affected by it much, I think that's pretty good. Okay, so at the end of the day, there's just a lot of questions. Okay, I'm saying I think, I believe, I'm gonna try it out. I just don't know. It's not clear that Havok will be very strong. Could be wrong on this, but he's a card that doesn't do multiple beneficial things. That's something I use to judge cards. Does it do multiple good things? Havok doesn't. He powers up himself, which is good, and he limits your energy, which is not good. Now, if you send him to your opponent, limiting their energy is good, but then powering up himself on your opponent's side of the board is not good. Okay, so he's never doing both things in a good way in the same game. He's either helping you out by adding power, or he's helping you out by limiting your opponent's energy. He's never doing both at the same time in the same game. He just can't. Okay, he's only on one side of the board. And so because of that, I think he actually is one-dimensional. I think he's only doing one main beneficial thing every game, and you actually have to play around him, try and negate his side effect or give that to your opponent, and that's difficult. I just think he has a lot of requirements and needs, and I'm not sure the payoff is worth it. So I'm giving Havok a questionable 2.5, 2 to 3 stars rating. He's either weak or decent. I don't think he's horrible anymore now that he gets +4 each turn. That is a lot of power, but I don't think I can just label him as good or great until I see him in action. But again, he's Series 4. He's coming into spotlights with some amazing cards, so even if you have questions on Havok like I do, it might just be an easy pickup because 3,000 tokens and a great spotlight cash lineup. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you are excited for Havok, if you think I'm dead wrong and he's going to be the best thing since sliced bread or since Blob, because Blob is pretty dang good, or if you also just think he's kind of weak or questionable, let me know what you think, and until then, I'll see you next time.